Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. My guest today is Ben Rhodes. He served the two full mandates of Barack Obama. He was his speechwriter. He was also Deputy National Security Advisor. Thank you very much for being on the show today.
Good to be with you.
Ben Rhodes has often been described as the closest advisor to Barack Obama when it comes to foreign policy. He played a key role in some of the most sensitive diplomatic issues, from the Iran nuclear deal to the reestablishment of diplomatic ties with Cuba, from the intervention in Libya to the infamous red lines on Syria. And you talk about Obama and the key moments in a memoir. In English, it's called The World as It Is. It is now also being published in French by Saint-Simon under the title Obama Confidentiel. Everyone will understand that. And indeed, you give an insider's account of Obama, some more personal moments. You begin your book actually by recounting the last official trip. You are in Peru, November 2016. Trump has been elected, and you're in the presidential armored car known as the Beast. Mm-hmm. And Obama says, what if we were wrong?
Mm-hmm. Well, since the election, we had been trying to figure out, like everybody else, what happened here.
You never saw it coming.
We were surprised. And on election night, I remember Obama called me after the returns were done. And he sounded like someone who had received a diagnosis. You know, well, that happened, he said, and he was trying to process the result. And then 2 weeks went by, and we were in the car. What he meant when he said, you know, what if we were wrong, is I think people like Obama and probably me, progressives, tend to think that history is inevitable, that it is moving in one direction. You know, we're becoming more inclusive, more tolerant. And Trump obviously reflected the opposite vision of that. And Obama said, what if we were wrong? What if people want to just fall back into their tribe, their nation, their ethnicity? And ultimately, we talked about it. And he landed at the conclusion that history zigs and zags. It doesn't move in a straight line. So that Trump could be a step back, but we're not necessarily wrong. It just may take longer to achieve the vision that he was pursuing.
Right. And in a way, he was talking, and there are other instances in the book where he does, about race.
Yes.
He didn't do so publicly for obvious reasons, but he did so in private. He felt that race was playing a key role during his presidency.
Absolutely. You know, I wanted in this book to let Barack Obama talk and let people hear how he talked to me in private. And he would say things like, we'd be preparing for a press conference or like an interview like this. And I'd say, well, you're going to be asked, is race a key factor in the opposition that you face? And he'd say, yes, of course, next question. You know, to him, it was obvious that the opposition that he faced from the Republican Party, the birther movement led by Donald Trump, was rooted in racism. He didn't want to say that as president because he knew that if he did, we'd just be having a debate about race. We wouldn't be able to focus on.
Was it a mistake in retrospect not to be more pushy on this issue?
I don't think so, because the experience he had is if he ever said anything about race, it's all anybody would talk about for a week or two, right? So any agenda he had would be eclipsed by race. I also think it was important. He was the first. If you look at the African Americans running for president now, Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, they're much more overt in talking about their racial identity. So I think Obama had to break the barrier. Right. And now it's made it easier for other politicians to talk about race.
Right. It has also made it easier for Donald Trump to win, in a way.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that Obama, there was a backlash to a black president, of course. But remember, Obama was reelected decisively. So he personally was able to overcome the backlash to the fact of there being a black president. The problem was that personal popularity wasn't transferable over to, say, Hillary Clinton or other Democrats.
So it's more Hillary's loss than his, in a way.
Well, he wasn't on the ballot. I mean, he won both of his elections. I don't say that to blame Hillary Clinton. I say that to make the point that what was unusual about Obama is that he had a charisma that allowed him to overcome the racism in American society, to be elected with huge majorities twice. Donald Trump gave expression, I think, to many of the grievances about the changes that were taking place in the United States. And when Obama was no longer able to lead the ticket, he was able, of course, to get elected.
Right. And obviously this changes everything. There's obviously still an issue that's pretty much on the radar, the Russian meddling. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that you guys were not forceful enough to denounce it? And because as everyone else, probably you thought Donald Trump would never win, and so it was worthless.
Well, the mistake that I think we made, that I write about in this book, is that the U.S., the Obama administration, dealt with the Russian intervention as kind of a cybersecurity issue. They're hacking emails and releasing them.
But as a side issue also.
Well, not as a side issue, but as for me, the information warfare, the disinformation campaign, the creation and dissemination of false news stories, that was ultimately just as important as Russia stealing emails and releasing them. And we put less of a spotlight on that. I describe in the book, though, that I raised this concern with Obama. I said, should we be raising more attention on this? And he said, the people who are consuming Russian-created disinformation, negative stories about Hillary Clinton, are not going to listen to me. If Obama's belief is, if I start saying some of those news stories you're reading about Hillary Clinton are fake news from Russia, that Obama wouldn't be the messenger who's credible in terms of being able to convince people to ignore that information, because it was targeted at right-wing audiences. So we tried to get the intelligence community, and we did, get them to go out and put out statements saying that Russia was meddling, Russia was intervening. But ultimately, the challenge is we didn't have a lot of tools to stop this. The U.S. has an open internet. People's Facebook accounts are open. The U.S. government can't come in and block, like a goalie, the spread of this fake news.
Right. Obviously, Russia is still in the news and the ties with Trump. Do you think this will bring him down eventually?
Well, I think it'll be a part of a series of things that hopefully result in his defeat for re-election.
But not his impeachment.
Impeachment is a political decision.
Right.
I think it's hard, sometimes people think it's a legal question. I think Trump will be implicated in Mueller's findings. I think the collusion and collaboration between the Trump organization, the Trump campaign, and Russia has already been well established. I think it's likely to bring in members of Trump's family by the time that Mueller is done with this. But ultimately, even if the House of Representatives were to impeach Trump, the Senate requires Republicans to decide to get rid of Trump. I think that's highly unlikely. I think it will politically weaken and damage Trump. But again, I think it's more likely that he's standing for re-election.
Right. I mean, there are a number of episodes you recount, especially it's very interesting, your prominent role in the opening up with Cuba, secretive meetings in Canada with Alejandro Castro. But I want to go on a point that's been a big point of debate, including here in France, the infamous red lines on chemical weapons use in Syria. The former French president, François Hollande, has often said that the planes were ready to strike and that Obama essentially stabbed us in the back and did not hit Assad. And this was the seminal moment of the war. You were in favor of such strikes.
Yeah.
You were overruled.
What I describe in the book is what happened those several days. So I thought we were going to strike Syria, and we did have military assets prepared.
John Kerry was in favor of that.
Well, and I think Obama was inclined to do it as well. And what happened is there was a UN team on the ground collecting samples. So we were not going to strike, and neither was France, until the UN team was out. That was the agreement. So that created a several-day period when Obama could test what is the support for this. And I describe in the book what happened during those several days. The British Parliament voted to literally prevent the UK from joining a strike. Angela Merkel told Obama on the phone she couldn't support a strike until a full UN process had run its route, including trying to go to the Security Council. And then in the United States, the US Congress, the leadership, was telling Obama it'd be unconstitutional for you to strike without congressional authorization. Obama already had concerns that a strike wouldn't really make any difference, that the only way that you're going to make a difference in Syria is not just by firing some cruise missiles. It would take a sustained military intervention over a long period of time. And that, if he didn't have congressional support or international support, would be much more likely to fail. So he decided...
So he was right in the end?
Well, I think he decided, if I can't get support to do this at home, if Congress can authorize this, all I'll be able to do is fire some cruise missiles into Syria. And that would make no difference. Essentially, we could blow up a runway, Assad would build it the next day. And unless we were willing to sustain a military intervention, we're going to have no impact in Syria. And that he couldn't sustain a U.S. military intervention without support in the United States from Congress or the public.
You agree he was right then?
I do. In retrospect, I think the Red Line episode, when you look at it, it's quite a kind of mythology. But again, we saw Trump act. There was a chemical weapons attack. Trump fired some cruise missiles into Syria. France joined that effort. Assad rebuilt those runways, and nothing changed inside of Syria. I think the debate is really not just about one cruise missile strike. It's about, do people believe that the U.S. should have removed Assad from power militarily? And I think Obama's decision was that could result in another Iraq war.
Just very quickly, you describe how Trump is probably trying to undo many achievements from Obama. You say one achievement that really we could definitely lose is the Iran nuclear deal. There's no way of getting back.
I think there's a way to get it back. I mean, thus far, Europe has kept that deal alive. The Iranians have complied. Barely. There's a possibility with a Democratic president in 2020. The U.S. rejoins the Paris Accords. Hopefully is able to rejoin some version of the Iran nuclear agreement, able to continue where we started on Cuba in the negotiations I described in the book, the process of normalization with Cuba. So Trump has been something of a wrecking ball to not just Obama's legacy, but to the international order that we're familiar with. But the reality is, in 4 years, you can only make so much change. 8 years of Donald Trump, I think all of these things are irrecoverable. My hope is that if there's a change in the United States, there's an ability to pick up and build on some of the things that we were working on.
Okay, Ben Rhodes, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set. Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview.
The world is ever changing. The news doesn't wait. That's why at France 24, we'll always be there to help make sense of world events. For the best international coverage, 24 hours a day, no matter what. France 24, with you everywhere, all the time.